Stress is a natural human response defined medically as any stimulus that evokes an emotional, physical, social, environmental, or other experience which requires a response or change. How the body copes with stress draws on two particular systems, the nervous and endocrine system. This video will specifically look at the endocrine system and the role of the hypothalamic, pituitary, adrenal axis in a physiological hormonal response to stress. Firstly, let's briefly explore the notion of stress. The stress we perceive today is a completely different stress to the type we experienced when we were hunter-gatherers. If we were hunter-gatherers, an example of a stressor would be being chased by a lion. However, today's stress may include deadlines, debt, driving, or disease. Hans Say, a 20th century pioneer in stress, explained that a variety of stressful conditions provoke a similar cascade of bodily changes, and therefore, regardless of whether a stress takes place in different eras of time, the stress response in the human body is experienced. The stress response occurs in three stages. Firstly, an initial fight or flight response. Second, a resistance reaction. And thirdly, exhaustion. The fight or flight response involves the activation of the autonomic nervous system, which is not our focus for today. However, still involves hormones from the endocrine system, which work synergistically with the sympathetic nervous system. This is a short-lived response which relies on the hormones adrenaline and noradrenaline, produced by the adrenal medulla to cope quickly with the perceived stress. Should stress continue, the body initiates a stronger response, known as the resistance reaction, which comes from the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal hormones, known as the HPA axis. This feedback system helps to keep the fight or flight response activated, but also acts to sustain the reaction through a means of providing additional energy to the body. This activation begins in the hypothalamus, the master gland of the body, which is located inferior to the thalamus and is a major link between the nervous and endocrine system. The hypothalamus detects stress in the body and secretes corticotropin-releasing hormone, which acts on the anterior pituitary gland, inferior to the hypothalamus, to release adrenocorticotropic hormone. This hormone travels via the bloodstream to the adrenal cortex, which lies superior to each kidney in the retroperitoneal space. Here, adrenocorticotropic hormone triggers the secretion of glucocorticoids from the adrenal cortex to release cortisol. Cortisol is an essential subclass of steroid hormones that work to regulate metabolic, cardiovascular, immune, and behavioral processes in the body. When cortisol is released in the bloodstream, roughly 90 to 95% is bound to proteins, and the remaining 5 to 10% remains as free cortisol, which is the amount that is able to penetrate via passive diffusion across the cell membrane and activate its potential. The action of cortisol in response to stress is predominantly to provide the body with additional energy via gluconeogenesis by the liver, breakdown of triglycerides into fatty acids, catabolizing proteins into amino acids. In doing so, the tissues in the body can rely on the glucose, fatty acids, and amino acids to produce ATP, in other words, energy, or to help repair damaged cells as a result of stress to the body. During this process, additional uptake from the body floods to areas in need, such as the peripheral musculoskeletal tissues, brain, lungs, and heart. During this period of stress evasion, non-essential functions of the body, such as the digestive, reproductive, and urinary systems, are shut off, so as to not utilize valuable energy. So how does the body know when stress is no longer present, or when your body has enough energy to survive? The regulation of the HPA axis relies on a negative feedback system via glucocorticoids to control or resolve stress. The presence of excess or sufficient glucocorticoids in the bloodstream are detected by the hypothalamus and anterior pituitary, which is signaled to suppress corticoid-releasing hormones, as well as adrenocorticotropic hormone. Dysfunction occurs when signals to the hypothalamus and pituitary are not received, and a chronic stress response ensues. Research indicates that continuous secretion from the adrenal glands leads to exhaustion, which can gravely impact the whole body if stress is a regular occurrence. In times of stress, it is paramount that the body requires enough ATP or energy to fulfill its requirements to cope with stress. This particular response coming from the HPA axis is fundamental to our survival.